Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at possibly one of the cheapest cases here in the UK at the moment for those cheap flip builds. This is the Ebuyer stroke Alphasync Onyx. It's 30 quid. Is it worth it? Let's find out. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at the Ebuyer Onyx. This is a kind of own brand case from the people over at Ebuyer. I've actually bought this myself out of my own money, so yeah, I'm not going to be holding back in any way, shape or form. Not that I generally do anyway, but there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons to this particular case. Now, first of all, I would say if you're just doing a cheap flip build, low-end components, then yeah, this is going to be absolutely fine for you. And to be honest with you, it actually looks very nice with the 4 included addressable RGB fans, included hub as well. For £30, there's a lot to like. But having said that, if you're looking at maybe a slightly higher end build or even a mid-range build, there's going to be some things about this case which you really do want to take close attention to and see if it's actually going to be right for you. And actually, more importantly, if you're actually on Ebuyer site and you're looking at one of their Alphasync PCs pre-built that actually uses one of these cases, then yeah, you may want to possibly skip that model or pay for an upgrade for a better case. That's what I think anyway. So in today's video, we're going to go through, do a teardown of the case, show you what it's all about, give you the specs, dimensions, etc. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you whether or not it's going to be worth your 30 quid or whether you should look at something else. So first of all, let's have a quick rundown through the specs. So this is an ATX chassis. It is what I would consider a mid-tower case. You've got 7 expansion bays on the back for PCI Express cards. You've also got 4 included addressable RGB fans, 3 of which are up front and 1 in the back there. They are all attached to a single hub, which actually fails to have any form of speed control for the fans, although you do have a little bit of control for changing the lighting by pressing the reset button, which doubles up as an RGB button. Other than that, it's a pretty lackluster affair. The fans themselves spin at somewhere around 1200 RPM and are completely fixed. So if you want to change your fans or change the noise profile, or you want a silent PC, look away straight away. Also, when it comes to the RGB, there's actually no way at all of actually integrating it with your existing system other than doing it manually. So if you want Rainbow Puke, that's fine. You can set these to Rainbow Puke and do the same with your other components. If you're looking to pass through the signal to your motherboard or from your motherboard to the actual fans, that isn't possible at all. So realistically, you're going to be looking either replacing the fans and the hub or basically just looking at another case. Tempered glass wise, so we've got 2 tempered glass panels, one of which on the side, which is clear, unsmoked, and one of which on the front, which weirdly is smoked. So the RGB look from the front is actually different from the side. Not a huge deal breaker, but yeah, is a little bit annoying. Would have been nice to have either clear glass on the front to match the sides or slightly more tinted on the sides to match the front. When it comes to airflow, obviously when you have got a case which has got a solid glass front panel, you are going to be limited on airflow. And part of the reason for this is because the fans are just way too close to the glass. Even though we've got some actually pretty decent ventilation down both sides here at the front and also via the grab handle at the bottom, the fans are just too close. So actually I've gone ahead already and move the fans a little bit further back behind the metal rather than being in front, just so that there's a little bit less restriction. But to be fair, it doesn't make a great deal of difference and the fans are still pretty lackluster. Taking the front panel off is a relatively hard work to do. There is a grab handle on the bottom, so it's just a tug from the bottom and it comes off. It's held in place with 6 plastic toggles or lugs. They do fit in there very snugly, so it's unlikely to fall off in transit, but again, it's also difficult to get into should you want to do any maintenance, such as cleaning out dust filters or cleaning the glass. Potentially what you could do if you wanted is, if you're not really a big fan of this kind of honeycomb section, you could actually just cut it out. It is only plastic and a few snips along there would give you a completely clear looking front, which in my opinion might actually look a little bit better. Anyway, with that said, with the front panel out of the way, you can see at the front here, so you can put in here 3 120mm fans. Sadly, that is all you can do. There's no options really for radiators, that sort of thing, due to the fact that we've got these specific indentations and cutouts in the front panel. So 140mm fans are out of the question altogether. Radiator wise, there is a very, very small channel at the bottom. So if a very, very slimline radiator was there, you might be able to get a 360 in here. Realistically, you're going to be stuck at 240mm AIOs. That is assuming that the screws actually match up with these holes, which are actually slightly raised. So depending on how you're going to install it, yeah, I would say realistically, if you're looking at putting an AIO in here, you're probably better off looking at putting it in the top. Moving around to the side so we can see our tempered glass panel, which I've actually pre-loosened all of the screws. With this, be careful because it has got a tendency to fall out, so do hold it in place while you undo the last of the screws. Taking it away, you can see is a completely clear panel, although actually it is quite nice that they've put the surrounding black edges on, so if you do get your fingers on there, it's not going to show the fingerprints from the inside to the out. Now we can take a closer look inside the chassis. So like I said, this is an ATX chassis. You can put in, if you want to, micro ATX, and actually conveniently they have actually put a little pass-through here. So if you are using a micro ATX motherboard, then it's a little bit easier to get things like your HD audio, etc. into those panels or IO ports, which will be a little bit higher up. So that's pretty good. Something which isn't pretty good is if you are using a full-size ATX motherboard, they only included 8 standoffs of the 9 which you would normally require. So these little brass standoffs, there was only 8 in there, 6 of which were pre-installed. The other 2 I manually put in, and it means you're missing one potentially from the bottom, middle or top, depending on what you're doing, which potentially could lead to a short circuit if you apply pressure to it whilst the PC is on and not fully supported. So definitely, if you're considering building this with a board that needs 9 pins or 9 pillars, just put something in there, plastic, anything, a little bit of rubber even, just to isolate the motherboard from the chassis. Hopefully from here as well, you can also see the back of the fans. So the fans themselves, actually, they do look quite nice, and when they're lit up, they do look quite pretty. There's slits on the side, which mean if the fan can't draw air in from the front, potentially, which is what the case was like prior, you can draw some air in from the side, and also it does add a little bit more turbulence. The airflow actually with it in this configuration, completely unrestricted, is actually pretty decent, but as soon as you put that front panel on, it does appear to be restricting these fans. They haven't got the highest of static pressures, and in fact I couldn't find any specific specifications about them anywhere, so yeah, I've got no idea. Realistically, if you want high airflow, then you probably want to swap these fans out altogether. I'm going to take the back panel off now, so the pass-throughs can be a little bit more visible. The back panel is okay, a little bit flimsy, but absolutely fine. So now you can see all the pass-throughs, and actually there's quite a decent amount of them. So you've got a pretty good one here at the top for your EPS connector, for your 12 volt extra power for your processor, motherboard, that sort of thing. And next to that there's one up here, so if you are planning to mount some fans at the top here, a little bit of RGB, then there are the options to pass through the wires there. There's a nice big cutout on the back here, so if you are planning on putting a aftermarket CPU cooler in here, you can do very easily. You are going to be limited to coolers with a maximum height of 165 millimeters, which actually isn't too bad. Anything around the 160 mark, I would say, is a little bit tricky finding a cooler, but 165 opens up quite a lot of possibilities. Things like your Freezer 34s, the Hyper 212 Evos, those sorts of things are going to fit in here very easily. Even things like Deepcool's AK400 are going to be absolutely fine in here. So yeah, cooler wise, you shouldn't have too many problems there. Graphics card wise, if you have the fans in this configuration with them behind the metal, you're looking around about 290mm from front to back. If you obviously take the fans and put them on the front, it gives you about another 15 to 25mm. So somewhere around about the 320 mark is going to be about your maximum. Other pass-throughs we've got at the bottom, so there's a couple of nice ones here for passing through connections to your motherboard, things like HD audio, USB, that kind of thing. And also you've got a ventilated bottom section or basement. The ventilation holes on this are a little bit odd, so some of them are quite fine, some of them are quite wide, so they've got like almost like a stripe pattern to them. If you look closely, you can probably make that out. You could potentially, if you wanted to, add a couple of fans on the bottom here to pull air from the bottom up into the case. Probably not the best way of doing things, but certainly you can do if you wanted to. Although, do bear in mind, there is actually a hard drive tray underneath this side, so that is going to really take out one of those fans. So depending on your configuration, you may want to put fans in there. The choice ultimately is going to be down to you. When it comes to passing through cables for your main ATX, so you've got a cutout just here, which is the only cutout, which is actually quite close to these fans. So if you're planning on putting like a pretty addressable RGB strimmer type ATX connection, probably not the best of ideas, but for most things you should be absolutely fine. As you can probably make out in this bottom section here, with the fans on the backside of the metal frame, there's a really tight section there, so it's basically almost touching the bottom basement section. So again, when it comes to things like radiators, for the bottom section, 360, no chance in hell really, but for a 240 on there, you probably could just about get away with it. Also at the bottom, something which some people may like, some people may dislike, is we've got a cutout section here. So if you've got a relatively high-end power supply and you want to show it off, you can do. Or alternatively, if you're going to be using cheap and cheerful, then some carbon fibre wrap on there will do the trick. Taking a look at the back, so we've got traditional ATX power supply basement section here. You can put a power supply in here, pretty much whatever size you want. There isn't really a great deal of restriction. Most people are going to put in something like a 160, maybe a 180 power supply at most. No real need for a modular power supply, but one with thin cables I would certainly recommend. Moving up, we've got the blanking plates, all of which are captive, which is kind of to be expected at this sort of price point, I think. Something they have actually done, which I do like, and they've integrated very nicely, is this panel here. So from the inside there's just like a little push pin, push that in, flips out, and then you can gain access to your screws on the side. And I feel that actually is a very nice thing, and I wish other manufacturers would take note of that. That's actually very good, very ergonomic. You can, if you want to, put a retaining screw in there. The choice is entirely up to you. I probably wouldn't, but entirely up to you. Like I said, it does seem to hold itself in place very nicely. It is plastic, so potentially after a while that plastic could become a little bit brittle and potentially snap off, but if it does, you can always put a screw in, like I said. Moving up, like I said, we've got the 120mm fan in here, so again, addressable RGB, only controlled from the built-in hub, so if for some reason the hub goes pear-shaped, then you're basically screwed. These fans don't have any PWM wires, they don't have any... Basically, it's just a custom 6-pin cable. Now, potentially you could rewire it if you wanted to, and you had the inclination to do so and configure your own setup. Most people, I think, probably wouldn't, so you're kind of going to be stuck as is. There is a little bit of adjustment up and down there, so if you want to raise or lower it a bit, you certainly can do. And we've got the I/O section here, which is a little bit jagged on this side here, where it holds in the I/O shield, so do watch out for that. There's a little bit on the sharp side, so yeah, delicate fingers, beware. Moving around onto the back side, so this is where all the wiring is. Now I'm going to get rid of some of the wiring here, get this out of the way so we can see this a little bit clearer. So effectively you've got all 4 fans going into this hub on the back. It's a very custom hub. The 6 pins don't look like any other 6 pins that I've ever seen before, such as your Saharas and things like that. Maybe even some of those cheaper Chinese brands. They don't appear to be the same. Again, if you wanted to use it, you can do. It's only held in place with a sticky pad, so if you want to, you can just rip that out, ditch the fans altogether and put something else in, should you wish to upgrade when funds are available. Cables on them, nice long cables, so you've got no issues there. If you want to move the fans around, put them in different positions, you can do. Lots of tie down points, so that's going to be nice and easy to do. Pass-throughs, like we said, for the cables, etc. Basement section is kind of pretty much open, so there's nothing actually getting in the way there, other than there is a removable drive caddy just here. So undo a thumb screw and you can pull this caddy out. It's not, well, I suppose technically it is a caddy. It's a very small piece of metal, so you can mount on there a 3.5-inch drive or a 2.5-inch drive, whichever you want to do, or just leave it out altogether. And also on the bottom of the chassis, there are some holes punched out, so if you want to put another drive in there, you can do. Effectively, this case will take 2 3.5-inch drives or 2 2.5-inch drives, with potentially the option to put another 2.5-inch drive actually in the bottom here. There is some punch outs which you can just about make out there. I'll show you some images from the other side. So there's 2 screws there. You could hang a 2.5-inch SSD off of that should you want to. I think for most people, 2 drives is probably going to be enough in terms of additional storage. A lot of drives these days are becoming M.2, and price-wise, there's no real reason not to use M.2 unless your board doesn't support it. But yeah, 2 drives, 3.5 or 2.5 are going to be absolutely fine. Power supply wise, like I said, yeah, plenty of room there. There's nothing really restricting it. Something which I don't like about it is where the ventilation is for the power supply. So the ventilation is very, very restricted. So potentially if you've got a very nice power supply, or potentially even a very cheap power supply, you may find the thermals actually getting a little bit out of control with the power supply, because there isn't a lot of ventilation there. And with the filter on there as well, which basically the holes don't really match up, so you're making small holes even smaller with the mesh on there. I personally would probably recommend removing the mesh filter altogether and just do some routine cleaning and maintenance. So back to the hub, that is powered by a single SATA lead. That is the only real cable that goes to it, other than there is the reset switch which has been repurposed to control it. So press the button, you can change the RGBs. We'll take a look at those a little bit later on. When it comes to the I/O, so absolutely fine, the I/O, no real problems here at all. So you've got your first main cable, which is going to be your power button, reset switch, all that kind of stuff. Or normally would be a reset switch, that's been repurposed, but hard drive LED, power LED, etc. Then you've also got a separate power switch one there that was tangled in as well. So you've got that there is a USB 2.0, two cables coming off of that one, so that's going to be two headers. Then you've got your HD audio, and there is a single USB 3.0. Taking a look at the bottom, so as you can see, you've got the holes there for mounting drives on should you wish to. Foam feet pads on there to reduce vibrations, which is awesome. This section here for power supply, I feel personally is completely inadequate. And to be honest with you, I would be very tempted to get a Dremel and cut out at least that intersection there and maybe put the filter back in or leave the filter out. Those holes, in my opinion, are way too small to adequately cool a power supply. And in fact, I'd be tempted to even mount the power supply with the fan facing up rather than down, just to prevent any overheating. Taking a look at the top of the case, so we've got our front I/O, which is all mounted right at the very front, so power button, you've got a couple of LEDs there for hard drive activity and power LED. USB 2.0, next to that you've got headset and mic jacks, another USB 2.0 and a USB 3.0, and then you've got your RGB button, which is also can potentially be used as a reset button if you don't end up using the fans and controller. They've done that a very good way actually, keeping that button way away from the power button so you don't accidentally press the power button or anything near there when you want to change your RGB lighting, should you need to. Also, you've got a magnetic filter on the top here, nothing special, although it does kind of give you the wrong impression that there's a lot of ventilation going on up here, whereas in reality, as you can see, this section doesn't actually need to be ventilated at all because it's completely solid. This bit here, you can put in two 120mm fans if you want to, potentially again, possibly an AIO radiator should you want to. Again, the holes, done a weird thing with the holes, so you've got some really small holes and then you've got some really large holes, given a kind of striped effect, which hopefully you can see on camera. It's probably going to be okay-ish. I would have preferred to have seen the honeycomb style, which tends to aid to better airflow. Yeah, it's not going to be the best, but it will ventilate some air. Okay, so I wanted to round off the video with the fans and the RGB in motion, so you can get an idea of what it looks like. Obviously there's no PC in here, this is just powered off a power supply, which is in the bottom there, and you can see the fans, and potentially if I'm really quiet you might be able to hear them. You also might be able to hear the cat eating, but you'll get an idea of what the fans sound like. So it's by no means silent. By no stretch of the imagination, it isn't silent. There is definitely a whoosh of air that you can hear coming through, and actually it is a little bit louder with the fans mounted on the front side. So with them mounted a little bit deeper into the case, it does kind of absorb some of it a little bit. And clearly we've got the side panel off as well, which isn't going to help, but it's going to give you a relatively accurate impression of how it sounds. I think it actually looks very nice, and to be honest with you, this is very reminiscent of the Cooler Master. I think it's the MB520, that sort of thing. You've got three fans up front, you've got a bit of glass, ventilation on the side. Clearly theirs was considerably more expensive, but you get better fans, better ventilation, better build quality, etc. So let's take a quick look at the different RGB modes. There are actually quite a lot of them. So this is the first of the unicorn puke ones. Then you've got one which is kind of like your Aurora flow, but still with a little bit of a dressel in there, so it's not changing all at the same time. Kind of nice, I like that. Pretty understated. Then you've got some more of the kind of colour flows, colour wheels, etc. The sort of thing we're all used to seeing. So going through the various colours. Yes, there's quite a few options in there, so you can choose something which actually works for you. It's a real shame that there's no way of actually getting the RGB to work with other units or other devices. Potentially, if you know what you're doing, you could solder it in a bypass or something to make it do it. I've had a quick look at the controller and it doesn't look anywhere obvious that you could do it, but the clever people among you out there may be able to do it. So then you've got your static circles, goes through the various colours, and it looks absolutely fine. There's a slightly slower version of the same thing, and there's various other nausea-inducing patterns that you can choose from, so it goes through all the same sort of colours. There is going to be, yeah, this one is kind of, I don't know whether it's trying to send an SOS. Please put me out, I'm actually on fire. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I shouldn't say that, it's not funny. You shouldn't have PCs catching on fire. But there we go, another sort of colour change. Then you've got your solids, so green, red, blue, yellow, then your kind of magenta, then your blue, pale blue, white, I don't know my colours. And then back to the traditional rainbow puke. Like I said, it all looks very fine. The glass on the front makes it look, I think it actually makes it look more expensive than it is. Let's be real, this is a £30 case. Now, Ebuyer have done some really good cases. It's a shame that they haven't got some of their Galaxy range, the W07, which we reviewed ages back, which was the kind of the Lian Li 215 kind of clone. That was awesome. That wasn't that much more expensive, like 40, 45 pounds, that sort of thing. Every now and then, Ebuyer do have some fantastic cases on offer. Now, depending what you're going to use this for £30 is fine. There are some limitations. Obviously, the power supply thing, I'm a little bit concerned about that. If you've got a power supply which is a little bit cheaper, doesn't like going over 40 degrees Celsius, if you're in a 20 degree room, doesn't give you a lot of leeway before you start getting into the territory where the power supply isn't at its optimum. Again, realistically, for £30 case, are you going to be putting very expensive components in here? For a APU build or a very low-end graphics card, yeah, it's going to be fine. And most people are probably going to build a system in it and be absolutely happy with it, not give it a second thought. But for those of us out there that do consider things like airflow and ergonomics and all that kind of stuff, then I think definitely you want to be looking at the price and thinking, okay, it's very cheap, but can I justify cutting corners that much in order to flip build or to make a build? I think a lot of people, if they're building for themselves and they're going to be keeping this case, I think it's going to be Dremel time. Certainly make some modifications to get a little bit more airflow on the bottom, or just use very low end parts. So there you go. I'll be honest with you, I'm not overly impressed with this. In terms of looks, I think it looks great. I think they just cut a few too many corners. It could have been a really good case, and it wouldn't have taken a lot to do it. And I will be modifying mine before I put a system in there, just to see what it's like. So yeah, potentially there'll be a build done on this on a Saturday stream. So if you want to see how that goes, make sure you're subscribed and click on the chime icon to be notified of future video releases. I think that's going to wrap this one up. So essentially, if you're potentially buying an Ebuyer PC from their alphasync range and it's going to be using the Onyx case, buyer beware, I think, is really the moral of the story. So anyway, I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.